So hello, everyone. Mariana Desaulnier, Communication Project Specialist here. We'll start this meeting with the NDP candidate, Audrey McKinnon, and the Tsilhqot'in chiefs. We'll start out with a prayer from Chief Francis Laceese.
Oh, yeah. Yes, thank you. Give thanks to Tsilhqot'in for giving us another day. First of all, we ask you watch over all Tsilhqot'in wherever they may be. We also ask Tsilhqot'in to watch over all our helpers in our communities and that the nation watch over their families. And also for anyone that has lost loved ones in the last little while, we send our prayers to the families. Also with this COVID, we ask that everyone's staying safe from that, and if they have COVID, that they recover. We also give thanks for everything that makes us Tsilhqot'in, our lands, our waters, our medicine, especially the salmon. There's abundance this year. That's great for food, and we give thanks for that. And also ask to watch over all Tsilhqot'in Yaz, keep them safe, keep them good health for the work that we do for the ones that are here and the ones that are not here yet. We ask all that in a good way. Thank you.
Tamayan, Tsilhqot'in Francis, Tsilhqot'in Jimmy here, Chief Jimmy, Tsilhqot'in, Nimai Valley. Yeah, just want to thank you for spending some time with us, Audrey. Just a little bit about our nation. You know, we are, for as far as I know anyways, we're the only one with Aboriginal rights and title, which makes us a little bit different, I guess. You know, we're a healing nation, as many of the chiefs will state, and we work united. Even in the word Tsilhqot'in, the river people, the river keeps us connected, and the salmon are flowing right now, and you know that's where many of our members are right now. So something that we're really proud of is our river that gives us life in a way. So, but also keeps us connected through teachings and culture, but also, you know, the united voice that our nation, like normally there's 6 chiefs, and we sit down twice a month. You know, August is the time we don't sit down. But so this is like one of their first meetings that we're taking on, and September is a little bit slow, but eventually we'll get up and going. And at the end of the day, the chiefs sit down twice a month, and we work with the united voice. So it's just a little bit about us, and I'm one of the younger ones, younger chiefs, and been learning off of people like Chief Francis, who's been around for a long time, and really look up to these chiefs. Each one of them have an interesting character to them, so we all play a part, no different from a family. I guess everyone plays their role, and that's kind of how we work as a nation.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me here. I don't know if I should, Mariana, should I jump in and introduce myself?
Yeah, I think Audrey will, introduce yourself, and then the chiefs we'll give the other chiefs a chance to speak, but any opening comments that you may have would be great.
Okay, great. Yes, my name is Audrey McKinnon. I'm the NDP candidate for Cariboo-Prince George, which, as I was saying a few minutes ago before we hit record here, is a massive riding. that extends across many different people, many different First Nations, and from Prince George, Williams Lake includes Tsilhqot'in as well. I work for Cariboo-Prince Tribal Council right now in their communications department, and I'm a former CBC radio reporter and host. I was working out of the Prince George office up here. I'm incredibly honored to be here and to be speaking with you all. I have a ton of respect for Indigenous peoples on this land, and have learned a lot in the last year working at the Tribal Council about just kind of the nature of the relationship between different levels of government and different First Nations. And I know that's unique for each First Nation as well, as you were mentioning. And I also really value the importance of I love to hear that you're working together. And I know that strength, that's something that the Tribal Council also really values, the chiefs of the Tribal Council. So yes, incredibly grateful to be here, and excited to hear what it is that you want to see from the federal government, what role you think the federal government should be playing for your nations, and also to share some of my ideas around that.
Thank you, Audrey. Chief Francis, if perhaps you wanted to add into that.
You're on mute.
Yeah, we're kind of getting used to Zoom here, but not quite. Hopefully we'll get back to face-to-face here sometime. And yeah, I too thank you for joining some of the Tsilhqot'in chiefs today. Yeah, it's very important, you know, with the governments, they have been around for a while, kind of know how everything kind of works a bit. BC and Canada, and we're also at the international, we go to the First Nations Forum in New York, and one other chief and I was fortunate enough with some of our staff to go to Geneva, Switzerland at the 4-day Human Rights Forum there also. So yeah, we first of all, let's say I'm a descendant of genocide. You know our history. That's where genocide was done on us. You know, basically to get access to our lands and all the resource. I guess that's basically the reason why I believe industry and government is kind of there, is to get all the resource out of everyone's territory and everyone's backyard without any disregard for us as Indigenous people. You know, so that's the way I frame it. But yeah, we're a proud nation. We're slowly regaining our lands. We, as Chief Jimmy mentioned, 2014 we have title recognition for the first time, probably over 150 some years, and title and rights. And but that genocide's going to continue if the governments don't give us full title back to all of our lands and full jurisdiction to all of our lands, and that has to happen sooner than later. You know, so I've seen a lot of governments come and go, and they promise the moon and the stars and everything else, but you know, they talk about issues like reconciliation and those type of things, but you see very little. I don't even know what, you know, I don't think they've even been out to, I don't see none of them around out in their territories, or, you know, they come from, you know, you come from a different background as we do, but you probably read more than actual, you know, come out to the territories or and whatnot. But yeah, so it's very important for us to, you know, as a people, we have to have our lands and our traditional food. You know, if that's altered, just the health statistics and all that start going up pretty high. And the other one is what they did to our people. So as a result, we have a lot of people that the social, whether it's drugs or alcohol or those type of things, you know, and we're very high jail and all that compared to our population numbers and compared to the non-native, you know, so something that's been there for a long time, but I haven't seen much movement from government, you know, that to try and fix a lot of these things. They, for some reason or other, you know, that's yeah, all those, everything is important to us, like education, children and families, health, you know, so slowly we are starting to take full control over a lot of those areas. We feel we can do a better job than let's say the ministry or even the police. We have to have our own tribal police and those type of things in our territories. Yeah, it's just a lot of moving parts, and that's why one of the areas international, we have to be there to uphold our human rights. You know, if our Aboriginal rights are not and are title to our lands and whatnot, so we have to take that one step further and put a limelight on Canada to show that these are the human right violation that's happening to us as a people, you know, and we have a lot of alliance with other nations across this country, and you know, and so we're here to do the best we can for, you know, for our territories and being Tsilhqot'in. And so yeah, thank you. We've met Jagmeet there a few times. We've traveled to Ottawa and whatnot over the years, so just hoping to get back over there and probably meet them again, and all the other parties that are running in this federal election. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, Audrey, I don't know if you want to just take a minute to respond to some of those comments from Chief Francis.
Yes, there was a lot there. I keep going back to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, because I think all of the aspects of what you were discussing on there are represented in that, and there has been almost no action on those calls to action, which I find just to be completely disrespectful of the federal government. It's hard because one of the things you said is a lot of people, you know, politicians come and promise you the sun and the moon, and then they don't act on it. And how do I show you my intention to act? It's the hardest thing. The best way to show that is to do it, right? I do have some thoughts. You were talking about how beneficial it is to run your own education programs and things like that. And I was looking at how underfunded that is as well. And I'm curious to know if what your impressions are of the federal funding of your education programs. And I think there's numerous other programs also that are run through Indigenous Affairs. So I'd be curious to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Probably for the longest time, those have always been underfunded. I know most of the communities out in our area, they have their own schools and whatnot, and you compare that funding to a high school and or schools in let's say Williams Lake, and just the amount of teachers and resource that
Yeah.
they have, that's that's way underfunded. Like yeah, that's just that's been like that for quite a long time. And
Mhm.
in my community, I don't even have a school.
Really?
So I don't even have a school in my community. In Chief Troy's community, he's got no school either.
Mhm.
So especially with this COVID and this pandemic, and our students have to go and travel to Williams Lake there and back every day. It's a bit tricky with this pandemic going on.
Yeah.
But we have to have schools that we can teach our culture, our language, and just the basically who we are as a Tsilhqot'in person.
Mhm.
So yeah, there's a big big difference there.
I think that feels like a really high priority to me. They all feel like really high priorities to me, and I do also want to acknowledge that absolutely. And I know some politicians have had a hard time saying this out loud, and I think it's shameful not to be able to say it. But Canada committed genocide on Indigenous peoples in this country, and we need to be able to say that and look that in the face. And if we're going to take any kind of concrete action and be accountable for it. But I do know, that underfunding of the healthcare, I think, as well, is part of that, and that's part of the federal responsibility. Underfunding of Indigenous education, and I'm hearing what you're saying about the importance of that education happening in your own communities, and that connection to family connections and community connections and cultural connections and connection to the land. In my work with the Cariboo-Prince Tribal Council, I know at least the DAC Health people, that connection to land is integral, and it's a part of who they are, and a part of healing as well. So I hear you on these, absolutely, and these are things that I want to fight for in Parliament. I think it's absolutely atrocious that there hasn't been more action taken on these, because, as I mentioned, the roadmap is in front of us. We have the calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and asked elders and survivors to sit down and share their trauma and relive that, and take care of that truth part. And the federal government has not followed through on the second half of that, which is reconciliation. And I think, unfortunately, that word has become $1 million word and started to lose its meaning, because there hasn't been action and real reconciliation. But it's absolutely something that I'm passionate about fighting for, and learning about as well, because I am a settler. I am a product of colonialism, and I was raised in a way that I was not connected to Indigenous peoples, and have had a lot to learn over the past several years. So I always want to put myself in a position of learning and kind of taking in more than I'm projecting onto you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chief Troy, maybe Chief Troy from Estee Law, if you have some comments as well.
Good afternoon, Chief Francis, Audrey McKinnon, Chief Jimmy, Mayana. I am the newly elected Chief of Estee Law First Nation. I'm new to the circle of chiefs here. And going back to the schooling there, they'll pay $100,000 for a bus, and our road washed out, and our kids got to travel a long way around, 2 hours round trip. And yeah, I'd like to invite you out here sometime to come and see it if you get time in the future. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say, and just great to see our people fishing on the river and getting their winter sustenance put away. So Channel, yeah, Audrey, thank you for, appreciate your time for talking with us today.
Well, I would absolutely take you up on that offer to come out and visit. I think that would be really incredible. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, education is a human right. You know, why are we underfunding Indigenous people when we have a fully funded program for everyone else? So no, you shouldn't. I mean, it seems the solution to me seems obvious that you shouldn't even have to put your kids on that bus and travel into another community. They should be able to receive their education within your community. And I think what that looks like, that's where the question comes in this communication between, you know, whoever your federal representative ends up being and you, the Tsilhqot'in chiefs, right? Is how does that work best for you? I'm thinking about a meeting I was in recently. We were doing a webinar on rights and title for the Cariboo County Tribal Council, and somebody mentioned the relationship between the First Nations and the federal government as a hostile relationship. That it's one that's still patronizing and still top down. And I think that needs to be completely flipped upside down. You should be the determination. You should be able to determine your own futures. Well, that's self-determination, I guess, right? And I'm glad that Tsilhqot'in has taken steps in that direction with your land and title. But you know, it seems like there's still a lot of gaps and things that need to be addressed.
Audrey, I guess it's my turn, eh? The question I think you asked was what the federal government should be doing. I think that was your question. Yes, there's a lot of things, but end of the day, it's just, you know, we talk about our traditions and our culture, protecting our way of life, but also protecting our identity as Tsilhqot'in people. And our way of, you know, this basically a way of being able to hunt and fish and never have to worry about it. Mm-hmm. Those are really important key factors that we struggle with every day. Fishing, our river gets threatened by mining companies. The mining laws have been in there since Canada was started. So yeah. Chief Francis talked about it being a product of colonization. And a lot of those laws are still in place to this day from way back then. They haven't changed, and they're there to protect Canada's investments and stuff. And there's no room for Aboriginal rights and title. And it still boggles my mind on why the laws haven't changed and made room for rights and title when it's already here. So that's just one piece. Fishing, hunting is no different. The logging and everything else has wiped out a lot of the habitat, and you know, the medicine that we rely on as Indigenous people. You know, our health has never been probably more, and never been. You know, a lot of people are just dying from being obese is because they can't afford certain jobs, so that they have no choice to eat shitty food, basically. So they resort to, you know, just staying close to home, and you know, they get stuck on SA and stuff. But they can't even afford to go to the river and catch their own fish. But anyways, that's just one piece, protecting our identity. That's probably one, I guess, if we've been looking at laws, how to rewrite them and enforce our own, because, you know, we're throwing a little bit of weight on ourselves too, to put a vision out there. You know, we were looking at Bernadette Jordan coming to our title area, supposed to be this month, but the election was called. So I guess having these elections called is one another thing too, as it gets in the way of business. Yeah. And there's certain things you can't avoid it. You know, hunting season comes, fishing season comes, haying season comes. You know, those things you can't avoid them. they come and they go, and if you miss it, you miss it. So a little bit not happy, I guess, with current government. I guess not. There's some things they did good and some things they didn't do very good. So, you know, no one's perfect by any means, but we made a commitment to come to our area, show them the impacts on our river, impacts on our fishing, and things that we wanted to redo and work. You know, these reconciliation words around government to government, nation to nation. You know, we do our part, and we take the high road, and we always try to work with government before we go. You know, in past terms, we went to war, but now when we go to war in a different way. You know, we go back to court.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a certain line that we'll go to, and then we'll draw that line with government. Doesn't matter who it is. You know, we look at Canada. We don't look at NDP or Liberal or Conservative. We look at Canada. That's kind of how the Tsilhqot'in looks at it. Anyways, being able just to protect our Aboriginal rights and title, I guess that's something that they could be doing a little bit better. At the end of the day, we do have non-natives who live in our area, and, you know, we do take care of them. We take care of them pretty well, and some of the things that they want there too also is longer term agreements. As far as I know, there's never been anything signed more than 5 years. 5 years is a hard one to win. 1 or 2 years is hard to win. 5 is almost impossible. We get past a 5-year term, looking at a 20, 30, 40-year term. Because a lot of these non-natives in the area, that when they come to me and ask me about tenure, I'm the one that signs off on a tenure in Aboriginal rights and title. And they want long term. Every one of them says, we're used to 30, 40-year terms. I said, I've never heard of those. You know, in our opinion, the longest one we've seen is 2, maybe 5 if we're lucky.
Wow.
So we tell them exactly, you get exactly what we get. If we get nothing, you get nothing. If we get a 1-year term or agreement, you get a 1-year agreement on tenure. And if we get a 5-year agreement, you get 5 years. So that's kind of how I broke it down for them. So anyways, the longer term agreements, that's something they could be doing also too. I guess I'll just stop there for now. I guess that's plenty to think about. You can see if you can respond to it.
Well, I can hear what I'm hearing is that both in terms of these short-term agreements, but also in terms of, you know, governments calling elections, that you're caught up in these kind of administrative tasks and unable to get down to the important work that you need to do. So it's kind of taking up your time and attention in ways that aren't beneficial to you. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yeah. Because they lose power, they can't make decisions or even come to your territory. But like I said earlier, when it's hunting season, it's hunting season.
Yeah.
When it's fishing season, it's fishing season. There's a window. And I guess non-natives, they don't really think in that fashion, where there's a limited window to look at something. You know, we had BC. I guess even thinking about BC and Canada, for us, Canada's been really easy to work with. Canada's been probably by far really respectful, and you know, they come to the table when we ask them. BC, on the other hand, has been like pulling teeth, I guess. It's been pretty difficult. So
yeah.
And
I can't comment.
Sorry. From far as I know, like when I chat with other First Nations in BC, all of them say the opposite. And we're the only ones that are a little bit different because we have jurisdiction. We have to write the benefits. So there's a little bit of conflict there, I guess, when BC comes to the table, because their laws and their what's that one word they keep using, their basically their jurisdiction won't allow it. But they haven't made room for Aboriginal rights and title. So that's why they, you know, when we sit down with them, they have multiple lawyers in the room just to sit with us, just so they don't do anything wrong. So very difficult for them to sit with us compared to other First Nations in BC who don't have jurisdiction.
Right. I'm curious, with your jurisdiction and being kind of in a different place in other nations, how UNDRIP fits into your scenario. What would be your vision? I'd be interested in hearing from any of the chiefs on this, but what your vision is in terms of implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, because I know that is the next step, at least federally, is to figure out how that gets implemented.
I'm no professional on how BC and Canada works, but Chief Francis is pretty clear on how we want to look at stuff. Full 100% jurisdiction in our area. So that means full consent, full control.
Yeah.
Of our resources, our children, you name it. We're the ones who make those decisions. It's not BC or Canada.
How does that play out right now, where you're not getting that consent and you're not getting that control? Where does the buck stop for you at this right now?
Right now, we've been taking the high road, but that high road eventually ends, and then going back to litigation.
Right.
We tried to avoid that. We tried to work in our terms, like Chief Francis talks about. Says we be honorable, and we do everything we can in order to work with them, and then there's a line somewhere that we eventually just say that's enough. And now it's time to go back to court.
Right, which is costly, time consuming, energy consuming.
So
right.
Words like UNDRIP, in our opinion, don't really mean too much unless it stands in court. If it doesn't
Right.
stand in court, it doesn't do anything.
No, that's where the implementation comes in, is how to figure out where UNDRIP conflicts with the existing laws and how to dismantle those in a way that respects those rights of Indigenous peoples. And that's where that hard legwork needs to come into play. I think it's going to take a really determined government. I don't think that, I think if the federal government doesn't have the will to look closely at those laws and take that step-by-step action over time, it's going to take a lot longer than it should, right? Because I think it's a lot of work.
Yeah, we've seen some work towards it, but when you look at the stuff that comes out, it's pretty watered down. It doesn't make room for jurisdiction, Aboriginal title and rights on things like forestry. I think there's one forestry strategy that came out that I think it's BC and Canada are working on, considering all the fires that happened since 2017, 2018, some of the biggest fires in history. They know that their practices are wrong, but they're still, money drives everything. As long as there's money in the picture, they'll never, doesn't matter what government is. I know they won't change their tune.
Yeah. I'd like to believe that isn't true. I personally put human life above money, which I think is really that's what it is, right? When you're talking about your rights to your land, you're talking about life too, and your rights to your ways, right? That's sustenance, and that's health, right?
Yeah, I don't want to be offensive, but in our eyes, when you grow up as a Tsilhqot'in person, you grew up, learned the language, the traditions, the culture, and you don't learn to understand or comprehend that unless you grew up as a Tsilhqot'in. So it's hard for me to look at a minister, whoever it is, a prime minister, premier, in the eye, and they tell me that they understand what that means. Because I know for a fact they've never done the work, they've never spent the time in a First Nations community or even growing up traditionally and culturally to understand the importance of that life. So to me, they just don't comprehend that. So I can't see that happening unless a First Nations person is the prime minister or the premier or both.
Yeah, I agree, honestly. I'm running as a white woman, and I see that as, right now women don't have enough representation at the federal level, regardless of race. But I see myself as a stepping stone. I think that my role is also to uplift other people who are vastly underrepresented in different levels of government. And I agree. I think that we need to see that representation And you're right, I can't understand. I can't understand the way that you understand because I haven't lived it. I hear that. I understand that I've got limitations to how much I can really grasp, which is why I think that these conversations are so important too. And I'd want to make sure that, if I do end up getting into Parliament, that we're continuing these conversations. And I know that might be a little bit more, it also creates work for you. So I recognize that too, that I'm asking you to educate me, every step of the way, but I'd rather make sure that I'm doing the things right, and not taking anything for granted just because I don't have the perspective of lived experience.
Yeah, that's really great. Just every time there's an election or every 4 years, there's a, so that is a foreign system for us. It's a foreign government, and it always has been, so like I said, they're just industry government. They're just there to, take all the resource out, and you can see that, you can see how everything BCTS, the mining, a little background on the miners. Vancouver's the mining capital of the world. I've known that for a while. When we travel to United Nations forums, some of those other countries, they're dealing with the same miners we're dealing with.
Mhm.
So, and our salmon swim right by there. They come up from the ocean, Fraser River. They swim right by the capital mining of the world. And Gibraltar Mines, they dump their effluent back into the Fraser River. You probably know that. You know what happened with Mount Poly.
Mhm.
And they're doing the same thing. All their effluent goes back into the Fraser River now too. And it was supposed to be those engineers that designed the tailings pond at Mount Poly that were going to design the ones that these miners were trying to build in our backyard. And Gibraltar Mine is the same. They're the same. Hunter Dickinson is a company. Gibraltar Mine's part of that. A-Mark, a few others. So that's what we're dealing with. And it's the government that given out those permits for them to dump that effluent back into the river. So dealing with fish farms and all that kind of stuff. DFO. My community, we've never signed on with DFO. Knowing that river where it starts off at the Chief Jimmy's territory, that's where the recognized title and rights. The river where it starts is recognized title, and where those salmon are born is recognized title. So that flows down to me where I am. So put two and two together. That's why I never signed on with DFO. That river's been flowing title for thousands of years, and that's like I said, that's our food source and has been for a long time. And yeah, so even the fires that you see in our territories in the last while, that's because the forest is mismanaged.
Yeah.
Mismanaged to the point where now all the trees are dying. They're the ones I brought in, the pine beetle, the fir beetle, and spruce budworm, or whatever that is. They intentionally did that so they could have a accelerated harvest. 300, 400 trucks go by my community every day. So it's not hard to see what's going on.
Mhm.
So, and we live in pretty well third world conditions in our communities. Just recently we have water that you can drink, and yeah, so it's just there's a scale that they use worldwide. Canada's on number 4 or something like that. I forget what they call that, but Indigenous are way down on
Yeah.
30 to 40 living index or something like that, you know. So just lots of, when you've been around for a while, you kind of see all this, but you know, a lot of it it's not acted upon.
Mhm.
So that's why we have no choice but to go to the United Nations and, like I said, put pressure on Canada and probably BC. So yeah, so it's great you're getting interested. We need a lot of people that knows our issues and
Mhm.
you know that they're open and willing to you know, look at what's going on with a country called Canada, I guess, you know. So yeah, so thank you once again, and for being a part of this. And thank you.
Yeah, it's absolutely my pleasure to do this, to have these conversations. I think they're incredibly important. And I, you know, I have no, I don't have capital P political aspirations or, you know, anything like that. I got into this because I was living in poverty myself 7 or 8 years ago, in destitute circumstances with my son as a single parent, um, and that just kind of opened my eyes up to inequality. And from there, I started, you know, learning about other things. I didn't understand the imbalance. You're talking about these almost two different nations, right? You've got Canada, well, and there's many different First Nations, but the fact that so many First Nations communities are living in these conditions that are so unequal to this really wealthy nation that we live in, it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And the only explanation I can think of is greed. And I'm just not into that. You know, that's not who I am. And I'm not afraid to ruffle feathers to get that point across. But I should mention that, you know, you've had conservative representation as your member of parliament for, and I know you said you don't care about the parties, but you've had a party with a very specific kind of interest for representation in this area for many decades, and we haven't had somebody like me having these conversations. And it sounds like you've been kind of disenfranchised by that as well. I don't hear that you're having these conversations with your member of parliament. And it shouldn't be like that. This is important. And it just shouldn't be swept under the rug any longer. I don't think that it can be swept under the rug any longer. You know, people's eyes are open. And I think the younger generations are a lot more aware, socially aware of what needs to be done and what's wrong. And I think people are listening to First Nations more than they were in the past. I hope, anyways. So I really appreciate you all sharing with me and taking time with me. It's really valuable. I really do cherish it. I do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I don't know if there's any more. Sorry, Chief Jimmy. I just saw you're on mute or unmuted, but for closing comments, we're getting closer to 2 o'clock, but.
Thanks, Mayana. No, just want to thank you for your time. And yeah, Todd reaches out to us here and there. We do see him when we go to Ottawa, and he allows us to use his office. So, but other than that, I don't really think we see him too much. So whoever is going to do the work, I guess. We always say, you know, around here, or some of the elders will tell you, if you sign up for a job, you know, be ready to do the job, I guess. And
Yeah.
And just some words that I came when I met Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister. You know, he sat in a tent with us in the teepee there and had about 15-20 minutes just chatting about stuff. And, you know, I was asking him what's the hardest thing that he's had to do so far. Reconciliation is harder than he thought. He thought it was going to be pretty easy to throw whatever resources at it.
Mm.
It requires work and time and commitment.
Yeah.
And we have to understand, you know, they have to go off of their votes too. They have to be able to get voted back in order to continue the work. First Nations people don't have a high vote population, so currency of votes plays a part. So reconciliation is not as easy as people think until they get behind the doors and see what that looks like, the landscape of it, and understand BC is a pretty big area. I think has the most First Nations in Canada, I guess, out of all the provinces. BC has the most. So it is hard. It is pretty hard, I guess. In his words, he did say it was pretty, he underestimated it. So, you know, that's something that's coming from the Prime Minister. So a little bit of advice for you also too, that it's not easy to deal with.
I take that as a warning to be humble, and you know, that I'm standing here and saying I want to do all of this, and I absolutely will do the work if that's the job that I'm given after this election. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, send word up to your man, Jake Mead, to reach out to us too.
I will. I'm trying to get him to come to Prince George.
Yeah. Yep. Alrighty. Well, great meeting you, and we'll chat again somewhere down the line. See you work for, not sure if you still work for CBC, but I'm curious.
I work just at Carriers County Tribal Council at this point. Yeah. So
I wish you all the best of luck on your nomination, and you're working with the NDP and Jack Meat and all the other everybody else across Canada, I guess. Good luck.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Hi, Audrey. Chief Troy here.
Hi,
Just gonna
Troy.
say, education in the West here, as long as healthcare is underfunded, and I'd like to say about the BC provincial government, you know, they need to respect our water law and our title rights, jurisdiction, and the guidelines on the water principles need to change because of the effluent going into the Fraser River from Gibraltar. You know, they're set at a low, not a very good standard for First Nations. You know, they just continue to dump that effluent into the river and poison our fish. So I would like to see that changed. But so Channel Ya, thank you for your time and good luck in your riding, and all the best to you.
Is Channel Ya, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Channel Ya to all of you.
Thank you, Audrey. So channel ya.
Thank you.
Nana, everyone.
Janice.
Bye.